2014 Cadillac XTS rear wheel bearing replacement, rear strut replacement, rear shock replacement, rear upper control arm replacement, rear spindle replacement. One of the first things we're going to do is rack it up until the rack is just barely touching the rack points, and then we're going to hook the scan tool up to it and deflate the air ride suspension before we lift the vehicle up and work on the suspension. If you don't have access to a scan tool to deflate the airbag, what you can do is right here on the back side of the bag, on the top is the line. You can back the threads out a few turns and let it leak out right here. And then once you're done servicing the suspension, you can tighten this line back up snug. You don't want to over tighten it. It's just a little it's a rubber O-ring that seals it up, and also the threads are made out of plastic, so it's really easy to strip these. So you can go ahead and deflate the bag, and that way you can work on the suspension without worrying about it, any pressure. And then when you're done, all you're gonna do is make sure that line is tight, and you're gonna lower the vehicle back down to all four wheels are touching the ground, and you lower it down to where it's about stock ride height. And then you start the vehicle and just let it idle for about 2 or 3 minutes, and the pump will automatically run and re-level itself. So after getting it up on the lift and removing the wheel, I'm going to go ahead and remove the caliper here by removing the 2 main bolts, 18mm bolts that went here and the one below right here. Once you get those 2 bolts removed, now you can slide the whole caliper and bracket off as one piece like this and set aside. What I'm going to do is actually get a tie strap and hang it from the sway bar. So I just used a couple zip ties like this, wrapped around the caliper, and then hooked it around the sway bar. Next, we're going to remove the set screw here, and I'm going to use an impact screwdriver and the Torx bit, and go ahead and remove the rotor. It's a T30 bit, so I'm going to go ahead and strike the end of this impact screwdriver with a hammer. The little mechanism is going to knock it loose and remove the rotor. Now I'm going to remove the wheel bearing, and there's 3 screws that we're going to remove, and then we're going to remove them from the back side. So we're going to remove the bolt here, here, and here. So you're not going to be able to get a ratchet or a wrench in here to get to this bolt because of the spindle here. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and remove the nut and the bolt that goes all the way through the spindle here, right here. And I'm also going to unbolt the shock right here. And what that's going to do is allow this spindle to swing out a little bit, and then you can get a wrench or a socket on there. And the way I got this bolt out was once I got the nut off the other side, and I used my impact gun and I spun it, and it came out a little bit, and then I took my wrench and I put it up against it, and I push with my one hand and then spin it with the gun, and it'll drive it out. So now with the spindle unbolted and the bottom portion of the strut unbolted, you can swing the arm up and you can get to the bottom bolt on the wheel bearing there. On the front side of the spindle is a 10mm bolt, and you can pull the ABS sensor out before you remove the wheel bearing. Once you get that third bottom bolt out, the whole bearing and backing plate will come off. To get the rest of the spindle out, I'm going to go ahead and remove the front control arm bolt, and then the upper control arm bolt here, nut and bolt that goes through. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Now to get the front control arm bolt is right here, so I'm going to take the nut off here and push the bolt through, and hopefully we got enough room between the gas tank to slide it out. If not, what we're going to have to do is at least lower the one strap to the gas tank and lower it down a little bit to get the bolt out, but we'll see. It looks like this upper bolt here is also a cam bolt for the cam adjustment and toe adjustment on the alignment here. So you could make a mark on it before you loosen it up so you can get it back in the ballpark of where it was. There was just enough room to get the cam bolt out without dropping the gas tank down or anything, and getting the control arm out. So now I'm going to finish taking the shock out, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the 2 bolts here, and then there's a sensor built into the top of it. I'm going to disconnect it right here and pop it off the little perch right here, and then we'll pull the shock out of the way. Now the rear control arm is also this one to adjust your camber on this vehicle. So I'm going to make a mark on this one here too, and then go ahead and remove the nut on this side, and the bolt will come out. Hopefully it'll come out right here. And before I do that, what I'm going to do is pop off the wire loom here for the ABS sensor that's attached to the arm. So the bolt didn't actually come all the way out. I probably could figure a way to get it all the way out, but I just pushed it back as far as I could, and the control arm was able to come out. So I'm going to put the upper control arm back in first, and this is the part numbers for that, and I will do my best to link all these up for us. So the end that curves up higher is the end that goes in the back here, so we'll put it in and we'll stab the bolt through. Once the bolt's through, then we're going to put the washer on, and it only goes on one way, so we'll reinstall that. Now that I got the washer and the nut and bolt back on, what I'm going to do is kind of tighten the nut until it's snug, but I'm not going to torque it down just yet. Now I'm going to install the front control arm, and this is the part numbers for that, and I'll link these up too. So you're going to slide the front control arm in and start the bolt, and you want the flat side pointing towards the rear of the car. Okay, once you get the bolt through, go ahead and start your washer and your nut, and you're going to run this in until it's snug, the same way we did the back one. So I got the bolt snug enough where I can still maneuver the arm where I want to, but it'll stay once I let go. And I'll do that. I did that for both. Now I'm going to go ahead and plug the ABS sensor wiring harness back into the control arm. And now I'm going to go ahead and remount my shock, and I'm going to put a little bit of blue thread locker on the bolts, and this will help prevent the bolts from vibrating loose and coming back off. So after just starting the two bolts with the blue thread locker on it, now I'm going to take the electrical connector and route it up behind here and plug it in and remount it to the screw on the top. The electrical connectors plug back in. I'm going to go ahead and run the bolts all the way in and torque them down to 74 foot-pounds. So now I installed the upper control arm bolt first. I'm going to leave everything loose until I get everything started, but I do have the blue thread locker. The brand we use is Permatex, and I'll leave a link for this in the description of the video. Now we're going to take this little dog bone mount here, and the bottom bolt that went through here had the long bolt, and the upper one had a little slightly shorter bolt. So you're going to slide that through like that, and just start the bolts. I'm going to leave the bottom bolt out so I can swing it up. Bolts for the wheel bearing here. Once I get everything reattached, these bolts are going to be torqued down to 111 foot-pounds. So this one will be torqued to 111. The one back here will be a 111. The one back here will be 111. And the bolt going through, the long bolt going through will be 111, and the bolt going through here will be also 111 foot-pounds. So now I'm going to put on the new wheel bearing backing plate and the bolts. And the bolts I use the red thread locker. I'll leave a link for that on the description of the video too. You don't want these bolts to back off. If these bolts back off, the wheel falls off. So I use the red on that particular one. And then here's the parts, and I'll also link this up in the description of the video. So I just lined up the backing plate and then lined up the three bolt holes in the back and started the bolts to the back. And now we're going to torque these down to the wheel bearing bolts are torqued down to 66 foot-pounds with the red Loctite on there. I also don't have the bottom bolt in yet. That way I can swing it out of my way to get to the bottom bolt here to torque it down, and then you can get in here and torque these two bolts. So once they're all three torqued down to 66 foot-pounds, so I got the top bolt started here. I got the lower control arm bolt going through here, the long bolt going through here, and I got all the nuts started, and then I also got the bottom of the strut started. And now I'm going to go ahead and install the ABS sensor. So you go ahead and install that and put the 10mm bolt back in. And this also routes underneath this little arm here, like this. When you go to put, now that all the suspension bolts are back on, we're going to go ahead and run the lower bolt down to 111 foot-pounds. Torque that down. The bolt here will be at 111 foot-pounds. The one here will be at 111 foot-pounds. The one here going to the top of the upper control arm will be the spindle will be 111 foot-pounds. Then the arm back here, the lower control arm back here in the back is 111 foot-pounds. And then the one back here is 111 foot-pounds. Now you can go ahead and install your rotor and the set screw. Now that your rotors are your rotor is back on, now you can take your caliper bracket and caliper and slide it back over the rotor. Pads, whatever, move or shift or whatever, you may have to adjust them here with your finger. Now you're going to reinstall the two caliper bolts in the back here, and then torque these down to 66 foot-pounds. So in the case of this vehicle, this is a body shop car, so they're doing body work on the car still. Now you would reinstall your inner fender well splash shields, and then put your wheel back on, and then what you're going to do is if you loosen the brake line or the airbag hose here, you're going to make sure that's snug back up. If you bled it out with the scan tool like I did, what you're going to do is lower the vehicle back down to where it's like stock height with the rack, and then you're going to start the car and let it run for a couple minutes, and that'll air, and the pump will run by itself and air up the suspension, and that'll complete the job of replacing the wheel bearing, the upper control arm, the shock absorber, the spindle, what else? And both upper and lower control arms. I'm Brian Esser from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this, and also to remind you that I will link up all the parts and tools that I use in this video. Thank you again for watching.